Wonder what class of a day it'll be. I'll saunter up James Street to see who I'll see. The horse show is on and Lord Sligo's today. There'll be crowds from Liscarney and further away. Women are better than men on a horse. I look into Sargie, he's opened of course. There's music tonight with John McGing. The people of High Street and John's Row can sing. Pat Friel is playing in Clark's all day. P.T. Mellin is humming away. Here comes Johnny Hoban, his banjo in tow. It's too early yet to knock up the show. A glass of stout and a pipe of tobacco will do us no harm if we leave it at that. There's rain in the reek, a storm in the bay. I'll drop into the west for a nice cup of tea. Well, it was an interesting being one of 8 children, David, and one of 9, the eldest died, Maura, as a baby, but the 8. So second youngest of 8. My father, Christy Hoban, came from Carabawn in Westport, and before that they came in from the Schaefery Hills, Glanamurra, the Schaefery Hills. Cara Kennedy, Drummond, a lot of relations out there. My grandmother his mother came from there, so she was Sarah Gannon, so Dara Hidlew, the Tunnys, all those people were related, we were all related, O'Malley's. So that was my father. He was from a big family in Westport, and he married my mother, who came from Castlebar, was born in New Antrim Street, Castlebar. Nancy Byrne was her name, and her father came from Knock, Clonterriv, and her mother came from Killala. She died in 1931, and he married again a stepmother, and he died in 1938. So my mother was, we didn't know much about my mother's side of the family, which was a kind of a very interesting thing in the music, and played out in music terms later, in the sense that my mother's people came from, as I always say, there's 2 Mayos, East and West. I have dual citizenship, and I have a dual citizenship between Castlebar and Westport also. You see, Westport people would regard me, I'd be more Covey than a lot of people who think they're Westport, so I'd be like, I'd have that blood, but I'd also have real Fishhead blood or Castlebar blood as well. Right. So anyways, my mother's side, in terms of playing music, I'm the only one of 8 children that play music. Some of my older siblings, 7 older, one has passed away, Maria, she died in England a few years ago. One brother, the priest, as he's called, Hollis, the priest. I'd be meeting people in Castlebar, like I'd be home from England, and my brother was, and I get on very well with him. He's a lovely singer, but Brendan is his name. But anyways, he's up in Dagenham Park now, retired now. But anyways, he'd be out in Korea, and I'd come back from England with rough looking and a banjo or some old instrument with me, and I'd come from Main Street, and I'd know all the people in the town, all the women. Hello, Mrs. Maguire, Mrs. Morden, how are you, John? I'd know them when I was a child, delivering groceries to the shops, and they'd all know me, Mrs. Munnelly and Mrs. Maguire. How are you, John? Great, thanks, great. And then that'd be, how was your brother? How was your brother, the priest? And I'd say, he's great, right through him. I'd say, he's great, he's up in Korea. He's the modern, nearly converted. But anyways, the next thing, he came back, and in the last few years, and this is interesting too for you, but in the last 2 years, Brendan would come back to Castlebar, and he'd, in Sylvie's, and he'd be down for some funeral or whatever. He'd meet people, and they would, and who are you now? Oh, no, Brendan Hoban. Oh, how was your brother John, the musician?
So it turned around.
Oh, fully.
Yeah.
But anyways, I suppose in terms of music, there isn't any doubt that there was appreciation of music in the house. Even though we went to Westport all the time, there was appreciation of music. There was singing, but it was light opera, and the chorus of the Hebrew slaves, and Nabucco, and my father was a beautiful singer. Now he would have sung like The Maid of the Sweet Brown Hour, or sung an old song, and he was renowned as a nice singer. But there was always, that was the open side of the music, and we sang, and people sang in the car, and we sang, and I always felt that the singing was the very best of us, when we sang. But alongside that then, I always felt my mother had the music. My mother was a great dancer. I saw her dancing the Blackbird once or twice in the kitchen on her own, you know. And she had a course, as I learned later, when we went to Knock a couple of times. And when we went to Knock, I was a baby, and we went up to this house. We could have been going to the moon for all I knew. In those days, David, 60s or whatever, Carl or the children up to visit the Byrnes in Clontarf. And surely to God, I was the baby, and surely to God a fiddle came out, and surely to God a man called Dominic Byrne, Uncle Dom as he was known, played the fiddle, and surely to God I saw sparks coming out of the fire on the floor. And sure as I am here with you, I knew that's it. That's it.
So that was your first eye-opening.
That's where I'm. Like, other people could have kind of heard us, and in fact we went to another house then out in Drummond. Pat Friel would have known this. Jim Friel was the name of the house in Drummond, Letcherbrook in Drummond. I could bring you to the house now. It was a pottery. Paul Taylor lives in it now. But it was a wonderful house. We'd go there on a Sunday. My father would go, and he caught all these different country people in houses, you know. And some of them were, you know, but this was one house we went to, Annie and Jim Friel's. And we were townies, we were real townies, like Belmullet Town, but Castlebar townies. But we went to this country house, and the table was pushed back. We got a feed of Cali, whether we wanted it or not. Feed of Cali, the table was pushed back, and James played the melodeon and Annie would dance. And the rest of my family kind of thought this was kind of nearly embarrassing, except my father and mother. They loved it. But the kids from the town didn't know what, you know, I mean, the older ones, they didn't know.
This was a different language, like, to the town.
Completely. This was live. This was singing, and this was live, you know. And surely, again, I remember distinctly feeling, it was like an implant, it was like a spark that was in me. I said, this is for me. Maybe it was even what I was thinking. This is connected with what I need to protect me in this unsafe world.
Yeah, well.
And now an unsafe world for me meant, remember I mentioned earlier spiritually and religiously, spiritually I was in an unsafe world. Now I was felt loved by both my mother and father. Fortunately I was felt, you know, I was, but one of the things I had learned was to, and this is very connected with music as well in a sense, I learned how to please people, how to make people laugh, how to be a bit of an entertainer, a joker, right? So that I saw also that music fitted into that, where it was something that distracted from reality, or do you know what I mean? It kind of moved away.
Day-to-day tones.
Kind of, yes.
Distraction.
Whereas for my own self, even at my youngest age, I was certain that music was about the spirit. I was certain that music was connected with the greatest of all, whatever the greatest of all was. It wasn't what I was seeing in the church, even though I was I might have been seen to be kind of a religious young fella in ways, but that it wasn't what I was seeing. Religious, spiritual to me was Uncle Dom. And it was also Annie Friel and Jim Friel. They've passed away now. If they were there, I'd love you to meet.
Yeah.
Pat would have known these people in a sense.
Yeah,
he would. But anyways, and not a great player. Jim wasn't a great player, but Jim anyway had music. And years later in McBride's home, I'd begun to play music for Annie. And Annie, when I married Isabella, no more than our friend, and no more than the woman down from Ballycroy, Annie would say, and her son. I was in a band, I think in the Pathfinders, maybe with Pat was in the band anyway, Tony. Mary played, keyboard, show bands again, and the next thing Annie was there and says to them, look at Jim Friel, he left all his music to John Hoban, ye got none of it. I said, stop Annie, will you stop it? No, he has it. And it was only again, and I was just proud. Quietly, I was as proud. I felt not that Jim's music was kind of hugely important, but it was the feeling, David, the feeling all the time about this music, this thing. And I'm not talking about traditional music or music. Yeah, and then of course at home, anything that came into the house like Al Jolson, or you know, light opera, Gilbert and Sullivan, and all this stuff. But I loved it. I loved all this music that came in. I remember listening then to to Cayley House on a Saturday night, and not really knowing what that was really, but full time listening to Hank Williams on an American station. You know, I looking at Hank Williams last night, like, you know, Hank Williams, I feel, is like my brother.
Yeah.
In a way, you know, it's just he's just one of those
a stunning representative.
One of those things of like, yeah. So, anyways, not to cut a long story short, but really the lead on from that was things were very scary growing up.
Okay.
For me, football protected me. I was fairly good at it. School, I was able to bluff my way through a lot of it. I was fairly bright, but bluffed my way through it. I didn't have any time for it, you know. And then my mother died then, and nobody said anything. Just we were saying nothing. Oh Jesus! Like nobody knew. I didn't know anything. I was in secondary school, just going into Jarlath's, and you know. And I was straight away in Jarlath's. I was picked as a musician, as a singer in the opera. Straight away, main opera job, like unbelievable actor as well. Actor, I had the actor as well. I had the stage, you see. And I remember the first time I was on the stage there, and they were picking the parts for the opera. Famous, Jarlath's opera was famous, opera and football. And I was good at both. Oh, wow. Yeah. And the reason was that there was good music people over them. There was two good music people, Father Charles and Father Waldron, were over it. And they were good men, those men. But they saw me when they were auditioning for the first year. And I said, fuck, look at this fella. And I heard them saying, you're a complete natural. That's music. Complete natural. Like something that can't be taught. And it wasn't even that they spotted it, I knew it. I forgot to mention in the national school, he was picking the fife band, the brother Augustus, 7 or 8, and he came along to me. He said, you're not musical, you see. He came along here, and I remember looking at him and saying, you're wrong. And he went along, and sure enough, like, I ended up playing the bass drum because I could carry it around McHugh Park in their skirt. It was completely humiliating, you know what I mean? And you know, in an old band. But my mother died. Brother Augustus came up to me afterwards and he says, I was wrong about that, about the music. He says, I knew you were musical. I says, you were wrong. Yeah, you were wrong about that, all right. Because I knew. All I'm saying is, David, that I knew there was music.
So you knew from looking at Dominic, at Jim and Andrew, this is something that I understand. Without being told about it, it made sense to you.
100,000%.
It was warm to you, it was comfortable to you.
It was more important than anything in the world. In the world. Secondly, I knew that others didn't think the same way.
No.
Thirdly, I knew I better keep this to myself. Does that all make sense to you?
Oh my God, does it make sense to me?
And this is tremendous, because I don't consider playing music was just the instruments came along, you know, and played instruments. But before that, there was all of this insight. Emotion really is what I'm talking about as well, which is the river, the water. I'm a water carrier, January, you know, and it's the river was flowing, and I was the earliest memory I have. I wrote in a song as well, but the earliest memory I have is looking at the streams coming down into Dulac. You know Dulac there, you do it, I'm sure out there, yeah. And the streams coming down into the river, like we used to go out there. That's my heritage there. That's my father's side. And my father would go out there and he'd be talking about the famine and he'd be crying and he'd be showing me famine graves. He'd be showing us famine graves, and he saved actually Annie Friel's daughter Mary. He saved her from drowning in Dulac when he dived in and saved her. But I remember, David, I remember thinking that stream of water coming down the river, coming down the mountains, into Dulac, into Killary Harbour, into the bay, into the Great Atlantic Ocean. That's what I want to be. Right? That's what I want to be, like a stream. Imagine having that kind of definite, like, clarity of what I want it to be like. So the difficulty was with all the other life, including all relationships, except, I suppose, my mother and my father, but my sisters, my brother, everything was strange to me then, like. And I was very fortunate that no one knew what was going on inside me.
Why do you think you were fortunate? Were you afraid to let people know this was you?
I was, in the easiest way is that I knew the truth. I knew the truth. I knew the truth that I'm sitting here, that I know the truth, which is manifest in music, which is in music, the truth. I knew the truth, but I also knew that if anybody knows what I'm thinking, I'd be across in St Mary's, where my uncle was, Father Tommy was band over there, and we used to deliver St Mary's, and I was very close to the people in St Mary's, the mental hospital people. In fact, I was very close to people that, and my father was very good at this. My father used to employ people that were kind of unemployable. He was a good man. He was an alcoholic, like, and he was kind of, you know, he kind of got half sober, but he was very good in the shop. He'd have every sort of odd characters that mightn't get a start somewhere else.
It's lovely, though.
And he'd have them in there. Yeah, he was an outsider. He was an outsider, and except he'd have lads and girls in the shop that got chances.
He gave them a step up.
He sure did. He sure did, and stood by them. You know. Now he had a tough owner. Run himself at it, and so anyways, going on from the jars, the stream, the mountainside, and all that. Oh yeah, about the truth and about the truth inside. The second thing I knew was that if anybody knows what I'm thinking about listening to Pete Seeger singing "We Shall Overcome" in Carnegie Hall for the marching down in Selma, Alabama, I understood that civil rights movement as a young lad. I understood coming home from school out this Westport Road here, walking home with a school bag and saying, will I or won't I fuck this school bag into the Loch Lana or over into the lunatic in St Mary's, because the world is over now. It's all over, because the Americans were moving into blow the shit out of the Russians, the Cuban crisis. And I remember going home and saying, does anybody realise in the world that this is the end of it? No, there'll be no more Brother Augustus, there'll be no more schools. I was sure.
But what was Castlebar like at that time when you walked around the streets? Like, you were the only one thinking this, and yet...
Of course I was.
And yet nobody else was kind of...
Oh, not at all. Oh, there was nobody else to talk. No, there was nobody. There was no... The only connection I had was through music to whatever... It wasn't to God, but it was to what I was praying to.
Spiritual.
Absolutely, 100%. Because I saw everything else that was going on was, to me, was like a play. It was like a kind of a bad drama, really. And then that it was more important what the neighbours say than anything. So it was really all that, without criticising people, David. I'm not into the world of pointing fingers.
No,
it's very easy. It's very easy to find fault. But like growing up, there was everything was a cover up, really. And what I said about the truth, for me, just for me, again, and I've struggled through life just talking about doing music through life, I struggled through holding this truth, which is music. I have to, or I'm gone. That's the way it was.
But surely your truth comes out every time you pick up an instrument or sing a song.
No, because actually what happened, of course, if it could be that way, or if I could sing every time I sang a song that here's the truth, I'm going to sing it. No, because what actually happened was playing music became a way of hiding out. Of actually the opposite. And this is where I remember a fella saying to me in the Cellar Bar about 1971, 2 or 3. I was back from England. I was up in the cellar. I met all these kind of wacky, different, lost souls like myself, but they were all playing music and learning music in Galway in the early 70s. This was before Frankie used to come in to learn off Mickey Finn and all this, before the Don and before any of the band, before anything. And I remember there, and a fella saying to me one day, you know, these instruments we have, they're like Armalites, he says. They keep people away from us. And I said, you're dead right. And I remember before that, David, I came down from Dublin. My sister Anne gave me £1 or 2. She says, go down to the country. This was the summer in 1970 after leaving Jarlath's, you know. Started drinking. I got a guitar. I was never at a music lesson in my life. I never had any music lessons. My sisters went to piano lessons to Mrs. Murphy, and none of them could play, like. But I was never at a lesson in my life. Never had any lesson in anything. Really glad I left school at 16. No further education for me, no. And I told people, if ever I say I'm going back to college, put me away. Yeah, but anyways, no, that's for me. But anyways, I said, oh yeah, I was 17 this summer when my father died, and I went down and I found myself with a guitar, and I could sing Neil Young songs, and I could sing Bob Dylan, lots of stuff like that. And I knew how to do that. I didn't have to learn how to play. I got a book of chords and just learned the chords, but I knew I could sing it. And not only could I sing it, I knew that if I sung it, I meant it.
That's the difference, isn't it?
That was the difference. That was the main difference. Now, whether anybody else saw, but people did see it. Like, I remember thinking, I used to be close enough to John Lennon at a time. He used to come in dreams after he was shot. I used to hear things. But one of the things he said, and it was how I used to think back in those days. I said, John Lennon was he'd been interviewed one time, and he was asked, "Do you really mean what you say? Strawberry fields forever." And he was pissed off. He was fed up with the interview as it was, and he was Rolling Stones. Do you mean what you're saying in it? John Lennon says, "Look," he says, "if I sing Beep Babalupo on Bamboo," he said, "I mean it. If I sing that, I mean it." And I felt the same. That anything I sang, it was life or death, really. So this was fairly good, and I could sing. If I was blessed to have a gift, as you're blessed with me, and I know that you appreciate that too. So that. Here was I in Galway, a guitar, no sleeping bag, no nothing, a guitar outside Killoran's pub in the prom, and it wasn't like it was now. This was 1970, 71 about, and the next thing, how the fuck did I get here? Kind of blackout. Didn't really know how I got there. Close to these two couples coming along, North of Ireland couple says, "Can you play that thing? That guitar?" There wasn't too many standing around like at that time of the night with a guitar. "Can you play it?" "I can, yeah, I can." I knew that. Follow them out to Gentian Hill camping site. Fire put down. Cider handed to me. A tent there. Where can you heard to stay? No, tent there. Sing away. Do you know me and Bobby McGee? I do. Sing that. So, and from that point on, again in other points, David, from that point on, what I was talking about, this inner protection, I thought,
it was released.
I was okay. I was okay. I could hide. This is what the point I'm getting to. I could hide because I knew that I had food, well, I had drink, I had shelter, and I had this instrument that you're saying it's like a shovel nearly. You'll never know who I am.
You'll hide behind this instrument.
You'll never know. Yeah, because I'll perform. So I learned. Now this will relate directly to traditional music also later as we move on in it too, because it will relate to something that I learned. A power that I had was I can be myself, but I fucking well won't do it because it's too dangerous.
Wow.
Too dangerous a world to be who I am.
To be who you are.
Yeah,
okay.
To be, that I'd learned that, and I'd learned it in music then, and even that it's so brilliant because people will think.
But can you remember times of your, and we'll touch about that now, so we'll talk a lot about your youth and everything. Can you remember your first performances, or was this like this camp thing? Can you remember some of your first, this is my first performance of music? When was the first time that you feel that you performed?
Oh yeah. 7 years of age, on the stage here in St. Patrick's School, singing The Foggy Jew and The Old Woman from Wexford. Brother Augustus standing in the wings and singing. Could I sing? Oh yeah. I knew it. See the point about it is, performance was from then on, but I had been performing before that. I believed that it was all a performance, David. To be quite honest, like when I went up on the stage and saw, I'll sing and they'll clap and everything is great and you were wonderful. It did not mean a thing to me. All it meant to me was going back to music again.
What you felt?
Going back here and said, yeah. I you know what I was singing, The Old Woman from Wexford? I meant every word of it. And The Foggy Jew, I studied it and I understood it. I was nearly standing in the GPO with them, and I meant it. Nobody might have seen it, but I did. So in a certain way,
then you were honest. Then you were very honest.
Oh yeah. Oh, there was never. It wasn't an effort to deceive. It wasn't like putting one over. No. It was pure survival. Real survival in a spiritual sense meant I have got to feel okay. I don't feel safe, and I have to bring this power with me, And I knew the power. Talking about the power of music again, like you mentioned at the beginning, I knew that it was the only power. This is the power. And I found drink as well, you see. This was at 16. As you know, when the power might have been waning on this one a bit. Do you know what I'm saying? I found a stimulant. Well, in my case, now maybe other people didn't, and I don't regret it, and I don't have any bother with people if they drink Loch Éireann dry. It's their own business. You know what I'm saying, David? There's no. But for me personally, I found this other depressant and fucking stimulant at the same time. And for 1 hour, I spent 17 years trying to recreate that feeling, and it didn't. Then it spun out, and I haven't needed it for 33 years. So it's a wonderful thing, you know. I mean, I'm blessed with it, you know. Or any substitute, including a person or a job or a government or you know, the things you spoke about earlier that you want. So being true to love, really love. The end of the day, love, which is music, I believe, and which is God, and you know, that's what I know. But try saying that to anybody. Now, I was 7 when I knew that. I can't let anybody think that, because they'll fucking laugh at me, or they'll run me, or something will happen maybe that isn't very good for me. Whereas when I had the music, I somehow knew that this is survival. If it means that I stand on Main Street, which I do to this day, I still do.
Playing the tune?
Yeah, and I do that on my own town, and I see them ducking around the corners, and he must be gone back in it again, or he must be gone down with the Romanians, do you know what I mean, or he must be kind of gone. People, not everybody, a lot of people would say, fair play, it's great to see you singing and playing, standing on the street. That's the performance. In other words, the performance on the street. Not that I think busking is it, but I did busk for it was the place where I felt, well, this is what I can do anyway. If all comes to all, in a certain way, I'll stand and I'll sing on the street, even if my hands are gone or I couldn't. I'll stand on that street and I'll get enough for food and shelter. A very basic understanding of the gift that I've been given in that sense.
Of course, we have a legacy of that though. Like we have the Margaret Barrys, we have the.
I met her a couple of times. She's
amazing. Talking about busking and busking for the sense of survival and basic, as the words you mentioned.
Yeah.
She was a testament to that, and then thankfully she became quite revered and rock star-esque.
Kind of, not near the end.
Not near the end. No. She got to travel a bit, but. What she believed in, and you kind of remind me a bit in a way, is that he sang what she believed in. When he sang a word, he meant that word.
Oh yeah,
and you could hear that in her.
Well, whether she was like me or not, but I brought her I met her at Old Head at an O'Malley clan rally, and I brought her to a concert in Cooley. I was teaching music in Cooley Peninsula for a few years. I taught out there in the early 80s. And I brought her to get put on a concert. So I met her on the 2 occasions, played at Old Head and whatever like that. And but whether I'd be like that or like the street musicians, like Galway was like an amazing place at the early 70s, because it did tie in with the Duns, and I knew the Pecker Dun well, and you know, and street music, and that's where Travellers and Johnny Dorden, who I adored.
Yeah, amazing.
I never met. I adored him.
Street player as well.
Yeah, I listened to a documentary on Johnny Dorden and listened to his music over and over again, no more than talking about Hank Williams. And the only reason that I do that is because he's one of the few people, Dave, that one of the few, and when I say one of the few, there's probably hundreds of musicians.
From
the thing when I think about it. So that was the thing, and performance was. See, it's an interesting thing when you're talking to me about the thing about the history or the story of the music. Like performance, I remember the first time. I remember in London, you see, when I started playing on the underground with a mandolin, and then I was going at night. Like the immigrant thing is tremendously important at 16 from 17. Yeah.
All right. So shortly after leaving school, you decided, I have to get out of here. There's something more for me. I have to experience something. What was it?
So what happened was I went to Dublin. All I remember was that my best friend in Jarlath, Colm O'Neill was his name. He's dead now. He took his life as well. But I was shaking hands at the steps of the secondary school, and saying, I'll see you in England probably, you know. We kind of said, there was no idea, there was no such thing as kind of college or jobs or future or anything discussed, thought out, as I said, like the priesthood. There was none of this stuff decided. Nobody talked about things. Nobody knew anything. There was a complete disdain and distrust of the Irishness, Irish language, Irish traditional music wasn't even kind of mentioned. There was a bit of a half mention of it by people from Connemara, that it was theirs, and you're not getting it anyway. Like,
and do you think this was a national thing or just a thing in Castlebar and Mayock?
Well, I'd say it was kind of like I don't know. I think it's just colonialism, post-colonialism, and you know, and the famine. I'd have a great understanding of the famine as well. You know, like there was no such thing as a kind of, we have this wonderful heritage, and you know, you'd be as well. Not at all. There was nothing remotely like that, and to come back, there was nothing grown up here. There was a man called Snooky Elwood used to come busking in Castlebar. He died in the county home, and with a banjo, and he was looked on like just as kind of poor Snooky, fond of the drink, and you know, this played on the street, and
so basically the musician, the busker, or even someone that played musical instrument, was automatically assumed that there's something kind of poor about them.
Yeah, unless they kind of went and made money and became respectable, like, you know, with all respect to show bands and stuff like that, and orchestras, and you know, and so on, and there was always a musical society in the town. That's basically what music was. The other thing I didn't mention that was incredibly important in music was choral music, which I know you had a background in Ballymullin. I know. You know, with the music, and remember, like, I loved church music, like, with a passion, like, and there was a priest here, Father Shannon. He was brilliant at church music, and he never wrote a thing down. That's what I loved. It was all oral. It was all I never. Yeah, it was brilliant, you know. So, anyways, church music was extremely important because it also connected up with this soul bit. Yeah. That was I still would regard church music, as Hank Williams would go back to gospel and
music from the heart.
Correct. Yeah, and also though, music from the heart, but also music dealing with something. Proper, not just how it looked. How good of an imitation were we of an English show band or an American blues band or whatever, how good of an imitation, how authentic it was. As I was saying, Annie Friel dancing, and like Kelly on the table, or like our Uncle Dom playing by the fire for us. Those people play music like drinking tea. To say that to somebody else, or you could say it, I know exactly. You see, everything I'm talking about I was in a world where it was the opposite of everything, right? So what happened was it all collapsed, David. Like, seriously collapsed. I mean, seriously went down. And then I discovered alcohol. And like, it's okay saying about drinking or not drinking again, but alcohol played a huge part with me and everybody else that I knew. The primary attributes would be honesty. And honesty, you put in your honest shift. Yeah. And I used to remember thinking, how come I do that and how come others don't do that? I play football. I used to think, you know, I don't see others doing well. It was life or death to me, like, you know, kicking around up in the Mall, like, it was like the fucking World Cup final. Do you know what I mean? But that's like playing music. I was the same, playing music. I wasn't doing this for the crack. No. I wasn't. Even when I was standing in London, you know, before going to London, actually. See, the time was very important. The timing of it for me was extremely important.
What years are you talking about?
1970.
So you left Castlebar, you went to Dublin for a while, right? Take it from Dublin.
1970, after 16 years of growing up in the west of Ireland, in a comfortable middle class father and mother. In fact, our family was kind of looked up to in ways, you know what I mean? And as nice people and successful in my father's business. And then when my father died, all the money went with somewhere funny. There was none anyway. and the house was gone and all that. So the next thing, I was completely and totally cut adrift. There was no such thing as going home for the tea. Going back down the country again to where it was all over. My sisters had a house rented in Dublin, and I went up there, and a friend was coming over from England, working on building sites in England, a fella I was in school with, and he'd bring back LPs, and we'd listen to LPs of Jimi Hendrix, and we'd listen to Martin Carthy, and we'd listen to LPs of Astral Weeks, and listen to LPs. Jerry was his name, and Jerry'd have all this music. We'd sit and we'd listen. I learned the guitar, and I could learn to play. I could play all these songs. I could sing. I'd only learn like 2 chords, 3 chords sing, and I could do it. I could sing, and I made no difference between it singing like something from Astral Weeks to Spancil Hill to, do you know what I mean?
It's all music.
Yeah, and singing and stories, and was all telling that same story about Killery Harbour, about the mountain stream. All about that. And then I was going out and I was learning, so this is O'Donoghue's, and I met, a couple of people, and they pointed me to Sweeney's Men and Johnny Moynihan, and then I kind of got to know Johnny years later, but Planksy had started, but before that I was kind of going around, and there was rock bands. I was going to Rory Gallagher one night, and I shook Leonard Cohen's hand another night in the National Stadium, about 1972. Now this was all new. Alan Stivell, there was an old folk club up in Rathmines called the Swamp, David. It was a swamp, and the Swamp was in the Leinster Cricket Club, I think. It was a fantastic place. The pub closed on Sunday night. I was really into these folk clubs and music, and I was playing the guitar. Did have a mandolin? I didn't have a mandolin then, but I got in as a floor singer into the folk club, and the next thing there was about these 10 musicians from Brittany. Nobody had ever seen them before, and they were just going to be the next floor act, and they had no English. They were all kind of, and I saw them and I saw myself and this other fellow, Martin Warren was his name. He was a very good guitar player, kind of a blues. We were looking at what they wanted to do. They went on and they started playing. Alan Stivell it was, and Gabriel Yacoub and all the other. But they went on playing like 1972. Nobody ever heard this before.
Brilliant.
Anything like it, and singers like it. It was beautiful. So I was open and all this and learning it, and that's why I went to England. So there was a whole cultural thing, and it was kind of an individual thing again, David. Well, even though, as it happened, there was people that I met who were interested in it, but it wasn't having the same effect on them as it was on me. So I went to London, and when I went to London, of course, I had 2 sisters there, loads of paddies that I knew, and Ward's Irish House and everything. So, but the drink was serious. That I drank plenty. I wanted. So I got a job in an office, but I sleep in doorways in the West End down in Soho, and all the old strip club owners, old Maltese, that looked after me. It was like I had the whole protection, because I got on with them. I played the guitar and sing for them, you see. So I left out jobs anyway. It was all performance. Yeah.
So you were on stage all the time, regardless where you were.
And the easiest performance was when and I'm just coming to it now, which you'd be interested in, because the underground I just stopped working in offices and buildings like that. Doesn't suit me at all, And I loved the immigrants. I felt to an extent that I had met my own tribe, because I met a lot from here that didn't fit in here. I've met others from every corner, from Belmullet to Connemara. People from Connemara, was only writing about one of them today, or earlier today. Sean was his name, Sean Brannock, but he was no more Sean Brannock now than I am. But that was the name he would tell. He was a ganger, But he looked after me. People kind of looked after me, because I wasn't very good at getting a job, or getting a flat, or worldly things, and that's where, again, but. If it came to sing, I could do that alright. A bit like Cathal McConnell or something too, it mightn't be great at writing, or Hank Williams' handwriting, he couldn't read or write. His handwriting of Hear the Lonesome Whippoorwill, and just be highly up to write. So I wasn't exactly like that, but I wasn't far off in terms of the world that we were living in. In London, it was a complete education for me from the pub, rock, punk, Rock and Dobson, the Cajun Twisters, and the Cajun accordion playing, like Rock and Dobson, and Clifton Chenier and all that stuff. Like I got into that, and as I said, Dan Gráinne and started going to the Irish pubs then, discovered this incredible music in the Irish, Fulham, Broadway, White Hart, Raymond Rowland, Bobby Casey, Liam Farrell. Oh, I remember hearing and saying, oh my God, this is Uncle Don. That's it. It was like a little flame that had lit, like those candles that lit all, it'll be lit all along, all the way through, or Annie Freelan's, you know. That was the only real reference I had with it.
Lovely.
Yeah, that's true. And standing at the stage, saying to this mate of mine, John Barrett was his name, from here, but I have to learn that, John. I have to learn that music.
Up to this point you weren't really playing reels and jigs?
Oh no, okay. Oh God no. Oh no.
Punk and rock.
Well, yeah, or Dylan. Like, it was like music of the 60s, right, you know, and music of the 50s. It was like, and I was really, really understood it. You know, I understood what rock and roll was. I really understood this evolution of, right, from the Delta, from the blues. I understood it up to Route 66, I understood what it meant, and I understood commercialism, and I understood the difference between that and Darach O'Cahan singing, or Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee that I saw. You know, I do write a bit about it. That's why I wrote this stuff down already, because I did, once I saw that, I said, I know, that's it. And also brought me into that world, but it seemed to be that I was, again, directed, and seemed to be that I was well fitted for it, in a sense, when it happened, because, like, for example, I'd go up to the Favourite, and Jimmy Power would ask me up to play, like, on the stage, a tune on the mandolin or two. Now I would have thought, I don't know much here, but I wasn't bluffing, but I said, well, sure. And so I seem to be doing good, and I'd go to all these folk clubs. I'd get in, I'd be playing the mandolin, and then I played it various, but I was all the time alongside it, listening to absolutely everything. There was classical music. There was an old soup kitchen I used to go to, and the BBC orchestra used to practice downstairs around the Previn while we'd be in this old soup kitchen, you know, or we were above in a kind of a loft. All those street dwellers, you know, and I'd hear this music there, and so we'd be down looking over down them there, practicing away, the BBC Light Orchestra, you know, brilliant. So there was all this music, and I made no distinction or difference between. The Irish music was, again, I would say, what they say is like, with America in the 20s, unbelievable, and I was just soaking it up. And there were immigrants. Now, there were also different people to me. I wasn't a paddy. But I wasn't from Belmullish, I wasn't from Bangor, I wasn't from Gráinne, I wasn't from West Clare, you know. But the music I knew. Connemara, even though I hadn't the Irish, but I knew what I heard. Yeah. And so it didn't sort of mean that huge thing again to me, or maybe it was a very early lesson about what's Irish music and what's not. What it meant to me was it connected me with myself. Now it would have connected me too, like with a few people playing. John Bow I played for a little while. John, I've met him for years. Yeah, everything that was meant to happen in my life happened, you know. But saying, would it have been better? Would it have been better if I was educated in spiritual life? Would it have been better if I was educated in how to be vulnerable and how to be sensitive and how to learn how to deal with other people? Could have spared an awful lot of fucking trouble, and also could have made for an awful lot of better music too. So I went over about 70, 71. Up to 77 now, and the reason I'm not sure of the dates is, and it's true I'm not sure of the dates, because there was an awful lot of blanks of time that I didn't remember from drinking, which is true with a lot of people drinking too. I didn't remember certain things. Plus, time didn't really matter either. I wasn't kind of looking at even September. Of course, September sure it was the same as May. You know, it didn't matter. So like, so years like that, but roughly it was around that. And when I came back to Ireland, I was well fit. Before I went, I played in a couple of bands in Dublin, like, that were starting up. Like, there was a band called Usheen and the Emmett Spiceland a little bit when what was left of it, like, you know. And there was another band then. I was in General Humbert. Oh, that was when I came back here, started up General Humbert here in the Humbert Inn. And then I left it, and they went on and recorded. We left amicably, myself and another fellow, Frank O'Reilly. We left, and they went there. They got in a pipe of Rory Summers and that, and Mary. I knew the Blacks well, and was in a band with Francis years later. Arcady. I know the Blacks. I knew their father from Rathlin Island. So I knew people like that I was playing when I came back then. I came back to here. Yeah, I came back to Mayo more or less. But really, I wasn't, like, when I came back here, I was staying in a car, a crashed car on Market Square. You know, a derelict car, you know, in my hometown, right? And there wasn't people, it wasn't that there wasn't people that would put me up, but they weren't forthcoming either, you know, that sort of way. So there was a whole lot of learning, Dave, that was like, I have no axe to grind. I have no regrets, none at all, nothing. I don't think anything was any different, it could have been any different than it was. But I do say, well, it was kind of interesting to see what I was doing, because what I was doing was, I was doing something nobody else was doing. So I was kind of, again, like cut adrift, you know, and I wasn't interested in getting to be like famous or great or seen. All I was doing was just, I would say, living, learning music and doing the best I could with music. And that's as true as I'm here, doing the best I could do with it, because it was the thing that was most important to me. It was more important than relationships with people or, you know, relationship with myself. The only other relationship that was really important was this relationship with something other than myself, something like a God or
a spiritual
relationship. Because I, you know, so that was it. So then that started the chapter of when I came back here and what it was like in 1975, 76.
You came back 76 with you, right?
Yeah. Is that when you were born?
I was born in 76.
Well, it was around that when I came back, roughly, yeah.
You came back to a kind of an Ireland that you were away from for 5 or 6 years, okay?
Yeah.
Did you notice the difference in your hometown?
Oh, well, there was no home.
Okay, so that was the first thing you recognised.
There was one slight difference.
But even in the town itself, was there a different energy in the place? How can you compare 1970 to 1976 for you?
Yeah.
Not so much that you changed as by going to England, but like the vibe in the town. Did Mayo feel different?
I don't know, Dave. I don't know how different, or even if I noticed it.
You don't,
even truly, like if it mattered. Now, these days, you could ask me the same question, and I could say, you'd say, "Do you notice difference?" Oh, I see. Yes. And when Isabella came here, there was only herself and the surgeon, the Pakistani, and the Chinese restaurant. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't get spaghetti. No. You know, this kind of things is 20 years ago in Mayo. So I could talk. But when they go back to that time, all that was happening at that time was, for me again, was that I had to, I had this music and I collected this music, and I used to go to, people asked me then to teach their children. There was nobody teaching music except Martin O'Donoghue, who was teaching up in, mainly around Clemaris or around Gráinne area, yeah. And there was nobody teaching around. So Mary Langan came and asked me to teach down in Culmore School. So I started teaching the Langans and all those, the Kilroys and all those people and nobody had been teaching before that, had taught these. Martin O'Donoghue might have had a couple of lessons, but they didn't really, he stopped coming or whatever like that. So I was the one that was teaching them in Culmore National School. All that came from there, and that was the Langans. Padder on the pipes, like Padder would got pipes made, and Julie was playing there. Julie was only 7 or 8 playing the fiddle, and so I used to teach her, and I taught them, and whistles and accordions. And how did I know to play them? Well, I just did. You know, I just did know how to do it, and then I could sing as well. But this was instrumental music. So what I did then, it was kind of like a double life in a way, because I did that, and then I hitched off up to Sligo, to Busk, to O'Connell Street. And I'd stand in O'Connell Street and I'd play in Sligo, and I'd make money, and I'd go down to the trades club then at night, and Joe Dowd would be there, and he'd treat me very nicely. And it was this. But when I was on the street in Sligo, there was 2 purposes of it, David. One was I was carrying out this tradition, playing the banjo, tenor banjo at this stage. Carrying out tradition, I was very proud of it. I loved it. playing on the street. Loved playing the banjo street. And I felt very, not for the first time, but not far off, talking about performance now, I felt very valued by old people from Leitrim, North Roscommon, South Sligo, that would see me playing on the street and say, that's good lad yourself. Or there was a knowledge, put it that way. That's what I'm saying. The people on the streets knew a bit about this. They knew a bit about this. And then I'd often, like one example was, I was there with Jerry O'Connor from Dundalk, had finished above in Tara Mines, and I knew Jerry was only about, you know, whatever age, and Etna I knew well too. I was very fond of them. How I met them, I can't remember. Probably met them in Galway when I was busking. I think that's where I met them. About 75, 76, when I was 77. And so Jerry had no job, and we were talking on the phone. He says, come down and join me on the street. And he did. For only one day, he drove down, played on the street. And of course he was playing great stuff. But I could play the banjo well too with him. So we were playing together on the street. Fuck, we made him almost made £100. They were throwing fivers across the street, honest to God. It was huge. The two of us just playing away there, and you know, nobody was doing this. But Sligo was a kind of a good stopping off place for men of the road as well at the time. Sligo was Skibbereen, there was a few Wexford, there was a few. I knew particular. I think it was a good workhouse they might have had, or that, you know.
Wow.
Not here, but I knew Sligo, O'Connell Street there.
Wow.
So just then, this day Jerry came down and played, and then we went out to Maharrow, to Ellen's. We knew a fella had a house out there, a fella in Dundalk had a house out there. We stayed there, played in Ellen's. Came in the following morning into the Wimpy Cafe, and we were sitting in the window of the Wimpy Cafe with all this change, all this money, and the next thing, an old man again who had seen us playing on the street the day before came over to us. He was in the cafe about 10 in the morning. He said, can you give us Lord and Gordon's reel with the 5 parts, please? This is the first thing in the morning. So out was the instruments, and we played it there, and they had a whip around in the cafe. And see, this was the reason I'm saying this story is because it was like currency. It was at the time. There was nobody. This was like drinking tea. Like, can you?
So unnatural.
Can you do this? Oh yeah, we can. So then Jerry had to hide the car, that we had a car, and the money in the bank and all this kind of thing. And he went off back to Dundalk. But I did that often, and then Packy died and came up to me on the street, and this man came up to me on the street. I was playing the banjo, and he just said to me, this man just came up to me. I spotted the medal, all right, the Coates medal, you know. I saw the medal. He just stood beside me, and I thought I knew him for a minute, and just said, having the knotted cord. I often got this kind of a thing, you know, this thing. And then off down to Leitrim with them. He brought me down with him. We hitched off down for a couple of days. So that was my life, and then come back here in a couple of days, Clonmore, and then I started teaching in Westport. But I was living here then in Castlebar, and I used to give lessons to guitar. Frankie Kelly, who was going to secondary school, and Brendan O'Regan, and they'd be dodging school, and they'd come into me for lessons. And the Humberton was going then at that stage, David, it was going, and the sessions there were remarkable too, that that was traditional music, but all through it I kind of continued singing Bob Dylan and Hank Williams. I always did, I always sung those songs, and again there was nobody else doing it. The Blacks used to come down, Mary and Michael and Francis, and they'd come down, and there'd be various Joe Byrne and Sean Lavin come over on a Sunday night, and they'd raise the dance and stuff like that. My thing was learning, and my thing was going around playing out country areas, like not an awful lot in Belmont side now, you know, like up past, you know, Bellacorey, not so much, but down to Corran. Oh yeah, Corran House was extremely important in the development of the music, extremely important.
We'll talk about that. So Corran House was owned
by Tom King.
Yeah.
Tom and Patricia King. Tom came from Offaly and made a lot of money, became a great master carpenter in New York City, and then moved up to Connecticut and built houses for people that were just millionaires, and million houses in Connecticut. His wife Patricia is Patricia King, who left Ireland, and I think she went to America anyway. She became a top academic scholar and set up an Irish chair of studies in New York University, and they lived together, and they had a couple of children, and they decided to come back here. They set up the Irish Arts Centre in New York in the 60s. Patricia came from Newport, from outside Newport, Ross and Rubble. outside Newport, Patricia McGovern, and her brother Johnny had the Toyota garage there in Newport, Johnny McGovern. But Patricia came and Tom, and they set up the Irish Arts Centre in New York, and also the reason they set that up was to do something for the arts. It was the Irish in America. This is the Irish Arts Centre now. That's all. So they set up this Irish Rebel Theatre, it was called at the time. John Lennon and Yoko kind of supported it and stuff, and there was a whole thing. But anyways, to cut a long story short, they came back to Ireland and they bought this old landlord's house pub, beautiful place down in Corran. It was called the George. The locals just called it the George or whatever like that, but it was Corran House. And they bought it, and they decided then around 1976, roughly, again 76, 77, around that, I think it was 76, they decided to open it up. And at that same time, it coincided with a man getting ordained a priest here in Castlebar, Mick Gavin, who's now married with about 6 children in Dublin. But Mick was a friend of the Blacks, but he was a friend of John Gallagher, John Mhaigh, the Irish teacher who teaches in Corran, from Corran, who teaches Irish language, plays the box a bit, comes from Corran, good friend of mine, lovely man. John was at this big night in the Traveller's Friend. There was about 1,000 people at it. I was at it. I came home from England with money and came down on the train and everything, and the next thing around 11 or 12 o'clock the man who was ordained said, we're going down the country now to meet some real people. Now this is interesting too, Dave, because this was actually from Castlebar, as you get, to go down to meet people in Corran. Or it could be like, we could have been going up to meet you and people in Belmullet or people in Gráinne, yeah, whatever. So down we went, got into cars, Mick Gavin and all, we went on an Easter Sunday night, I think. I'd come back from London, so it would have been 76 from that. And the next thing we arrived in this place, oh Jesus, it was fantastic. Oh, all these old people and the sea and all. Jesus, this is the real Ireland. The real Ireland, you know, the middle of the night. It's all carloads from Castlebar and lunatics, you know. And anyways, that was fine, but this went on, the music, and I was playing whatever I played at that time, mandolin or banjo or something like that, singing upstairs. Next thing, I woke up in the morning, somebody said, get up, get up, get up, get up. You have to go back to England, me. And the next thing I heard the sea, and I know where I was. Next thing I saw a big picture of Che Guevara on the wall, and a fire. I thought it was in heaven, I says, I can't leave this place. I can't leave this place, just great. So I think I did go back to England, alright, somebody gave me a lift back to Castlebar, I went back to England from that. But I would have come over that summer then, playing in the Humbert Inn with Frank O'Reilly, John Donegan, Shay Kavanagh, Rory Summers, and whoever else was around in that time. Maybe they had gone off with General Humbert, maybe not. But they probably had, and so that was playing in Corran. So Corran House, there was a connection then with New York City, and this is the emigration thing again, and Coleman, Morrison, etc. People started coming from there. They set up very soon in Corran House. I was teaching all the village of Corran, the children, every child in Corran I taught 2 generations of kids, like every instrument, and it was lovely because there was all these older people that didn't have like enormously wealthy musical store, it seemed to me, but what they had was they had an extremely interesting, beautiful, very nice people, extremely nice people, very rich singing sort of tradition and sort of like Irish songs, some of the older people Irish songs, and they had all the Scottish thing, all that. Oh. And they had in Corran, yeah. And Corran,
Scottish connection.
Yeah, oh yeah, from Tatey Hogan. They would have all on their knees at 9 o'clock or 9 years of age, on their knees, Tatey Hogan, and you know, so on. Right. So they had all this, but they welcomed Gráinne, renegades, you know, and through me. And it was through me that I knew from travelling the country, like people like Dundalk, musicians came from the north of Ireland, musicians came from Dublin down to Corran, and they could stay in the house, and great pub, and there was music. I remember one night there was a band from Brittany called Sked, S-K-E-D. They were really, really good kind of band, you know, and they happened to arrive there because there was no such thing as gigs, we'll say. And the same night there was 4 American lads called the New Heaven Hills String Band, a sort of a string band, and they were real Appalachians, these 4 boys that were there.
Old time bluegrass.
Very much now, very old time, you know, Matt and Dave Haney, 2 brothers, and 2 other fellas, and there was about 6 or 7 of them, and they were real old timey. I remember, yeah, it was kind of the first time hearing this old timey, way before it became kind of popular stuff again, you know. And so there was the Brittany and the old timey and ourselves then, and a few Corán people singing songs in Irish. So it was very, very unusual, Dave, in the sense that people camping. It was like kind of like Woodstock, like, but you know what I mean. But so there was no music in Achill really at all. You were asking me about Achill. Yeah, there was no traditional music being played in Achill. It would have died, you see. That was the one thing was in Achill. There was a sort of strong. Scotland was always kind of closer to Scotland. Or Achill was closer to Scotland, but Corán also had this connection with Clare Island and Achill Beg, which I loved. Those islands, you see. So there was a real cultural gentleness with those people, those places. Well, I got to know Clare Island very well. Pat in particular, Pat was very interested in culture, all to do with culture, literature, language, and that was why it was set up. And Tom could make it work because Tom could build so well and do everything. So they had that. But they moved from New York to do this specifically as well, to live here. So that was the experience of them coming back to Ireland to live here and to do this. So it was. But I can't. This went on for maybe, I don't know, 10 years then at the Corán House. This was before summer schools. This was before there was a kind of any sort. This was a residential summer thing that people, as I was saying about Faulty Towers, it was hilarious because we were all drinking and there'd be somebody in.
Would it only be summer or would it be?
Yeah.
Okay, only summer.
Yeah, only summer. So a few months, like.
A summer residency.
Correct. And then I would have been the only one. The others would all have come back to school and everything like that.
So you were only full time.
Exactly, and I'd be down there then on winter nights with the people, and I'd be there. And I always attracted musicians. I always brought people down there, Joe Carey, Paddy Mills, Brian Gallagher, all these different people. I brought people down all the time to it as well. And this was completely unusual, Dave. Like, there was nothing, like, this was before pub. Like, around this time, Claire Hoban came to me in Westport, or Claire Hoban from Westport. And she's...
What year would this be again? No, sorry.
Roughly 1980.
Okay.
78, 79. When their music had started in Westport as well, in the Ascar Tavern with the Stauntons. And probably with Connie Cullen, the kind of hippie thing, you know, in the 70s. But very interesting, very important too about that. And I was connected with that as well. I was teaching in the McHugh's gave me a room in the Wyatt Hotel now, and I used to run classes there. You laugh at this too. I used to run classes there, and people, Emer Mayock used and her mother used to come over. Her mother used to bring Emer and Gerard over as children over to me, and it was great. I was really delighted they were coming to me because I was very good at it. But I was also full of all this other music. I had all this music, different songs like Dylan and kind of singing and stuff like that too. But I was I was really on their side because I was really good at it. And the reason, one of the main reasons was I was totally opposed to anything to do with school. I was totally opposed to anything to do with competition or gain. Now this is getting to the point again about the music even we're talking about. Now parents could do it whatever they wanted. They want to put children into competitions and whatever. They started to do that, but they knew that I didn't want it. That I said, you don't need to do that. You don't want to go down that road of competition, whatever. Just let. So, like for example, you had like Jimmy Langan, like Julie's father, saying John Hoban taught Julie how to love music and people how to. Yeah. And I'm only saying that to you now because it's kind of something that's very dear to my heart that I taught. And again, that it doesn't matter what anybody else does or doesn't do, but that I remember running in competitions once run by the children themselves that everybody won. But 100 of them, you know what I mean, and they were adjudicating themselves, and they all won. Just kind of, I decided down the parish centre in Westport, I decided, how to help us, I'll do it, I'll show you how it can be done, an alternative way to having to put people against each other in this world of...
And how did that come across, do you think, with these young kids that were...
Great.
Did they grab on
kids,
to it?
Oh, they loved it immediately. Their parents wanted to, some, well, not all, but a lot of the parents used to say, well, you know, then there was no cultus in Westport. There was nothing in Westport before this. What I was saying is, there was nobody hearing traditional music until I gave them, at all.
Wow. Okay.
Until I gave them tapes, cassettes.
This was early 80s then?
Oh, before that even, late 70s. There was no traditional music allowed in the pubs.
Jesus.
At all. Now, I kind of don't like to kind of go into that too much, but it's an actual, when you mentioned Belmullet in the beginning, I mean, you talk about music, not at all. It's very important, because it's even important nowadays to understand it wasn't always like this, you know. So no, there was no. So that was
the same be said for Castlebar as well.
Oh yeah.
So equally not wanted in the
Newport as well. You can put anywhere around.
Okay.
The whole thing was.
So late 70s, early 80s, we don't want to hear their stuff.
Not at all. And anybody that played it had to go somewhere else.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Seriously. And this was my life, and I was teaching these children. So what I was doing then, people saw that it was very good for children, and some people have said to me recently, you know, but you were very stabilising. You gave them a great stability when you were teaching them music, because they knew you were on their side as well. This thing, you know, that it was on the side.
Make them comfortable, eh?
Totally. Instead of continuing on from school or achievement or becoming anything. There was loads of stories about that, and I was there. Claire Hoban came back from Canada. Claire's, God rest her soul, she's gone now too, but Claire came back from Canada. She had worked in Canada. Her father's pub had been closed for years in the Octagon. MJ Hoban had been closed for years. She decided she'd open it and settle and retire here. She was a woman in her 40s probably at the time. Paddy Hoban from Castlebar from Main Street, his son Alan had taken over, and Alan, because of the Humbertine, also employed us playing nights in his pub. Late 70s maybe. Sunday night he'd have the Mayocks. So no, that wasn't the 80s. This was before that. So Alan was there, and I was playing there on a Sunday night. I don't know, I ran a folk club. That's what I did on a Sunday night, which was having in old fellas talking, you know, Paddy Durkin, like, who'd give an old recitation and stuff like that I was into, because I saw it in England too, folk clubs and stuff, you know.
Fantastic.
So anyways, cut a long story short, Claire came over and she's talking to me. She said, "How are you, John?" "How are you, Claire?" I didn't know her, but so then her exact words to me, David, were this: "Do you think what you're doing here would take off in Westport?" So I said, "Yeah, I said, why not?" And now I was no class of a businessman. Like, I didn't agree with competition, gain, money, but I had to drink. I had to live. I had to get by. So I wasn't afraid to say, "Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that." I was the only professional musician, right? So she said, "Right, will we try a Saturday afternoon?" There's a few in town. Saturday afternoon, nobody did that, except in America probably. Claire came back from Canada.
So she had that mindset, yeah?
Kinda, yeah. So she said, right, so I remember it was something like a tenner and a plate of mussels. And I'd go over for 3 o'clock, hitch over. I don't know where I was living here, but hitch over. And I'd play from about 3 until about 6. And I'd get something like a tenner and a plate of mussels. I love mussels and tenner. And something like that. And there'd only be a handful of people, and there was only in that handful I could also name who were the music people. Now you'd know what I'm talking about again.
Turn the head.
There were the people that would say, there was a man, for example, that came from down in Kilbakenty, and he knew Joe Cooley and he knew hurling. So do I. Now there was another man who came from over a Haskell, and I knew marching Burns in Dublin. So
You're fine then. So you had two mates.
That new music. That this is kind of getting to the serious, the crux of it. That actually new music, and these were people also that were sending children to me. There was a couple of people that were sending children to me. Came back from England, an immigrant family that brought in 4 children. 2 of them are professional musicians nowadays, Brendan Keegan and Joanne Keegan. They came back from England, so their mother used to come in and sit with the 4 children when I teach the 4 children, right? So these were people that I knew about music in some way, Dave. Do you know what I mean? That knew, very few, but there were allies. There was very few though. There was a whole community of, I don't like using blow-ins, hippies or whatever, but there was a whole lot of people that had come into Westport from outside, England, Germany, Holland, places, you know.
To live.
Oh, this is a whole story in itself. 1969 when they came and they moved to John Lennon's island in Clubay, Orange Island. They were the people that brought the music, believe it or not, that supported the music. They weren't really the people from Drummond now, or from, you know, Kilmena. I remember teaching down in Kilmena in Cummins' Hall, like, of a winter's night, right? Teaching like from 3 o'clock in the day or maybe 9 at night, right through. And I'd be on the drink the night before, wouldn't be feeling the best maybe, but I'd be very responsible and very decent, you know. But I remember teaching loads of kids, and the next thing, 9 o'clock, thumbing into Westport, 10 o'clock, thumbing into Westport. I used to nearly walk in nights, you know. There wasn't a great support in that sense. Taught in, now it's different out in Carrick-Kennedy. I taught in Carrick-Kennedy Hall and so on. I taught all over the place, like there'd be hundreds of kids, hundreds, and I'd be making cassettes for them all, trying to get them what I would understand, my way of learning. Listen to the music first, you know, listen to Joe Cooley. If you had a record, I'd listen to David Munnelly, listen to people, and I'd be teaching them tunes from John Doherty or talking about. I did great work in it, like in that sense, because it was totally.
Way to teach as well.
It was totally, David. It was completely new music. Going back to the White Hart and Fulham Broadway, if I was teaching reggae, like, or ska, it would have been the same thing.
It'd be equally as foreign to these people.
There you go.
Wow.
And you're talking about Ireland, and it's a long, long way. I'd tell a whole big story about answer. What was that? The Ireland I came back to. That's what it was like. That's what it was like.
In Ireland, a Mayo that didn't really know its cultural identity, we say.
Oh, didn't even know, mate. Didn't know. Well, music didn't figure. Put it that way.
Didn't come under the radar.
Didn't figure at all.
Okay.
At all. And as I said, I don't know if there was a cultist branch, even if there was a half a dozen people in it at the most. There wasn't only that, but there wasn't any sort of root, groundswell support, whatever that you would get for it. It wasn't. I put on children's concerts in the town hall like that. Might be 80 or 100 children in it, so there'd be that number of parents, or there'd be parents or whatever. But there wasn't really much. You know, there wasn't that much. I don't want to be saying I was the only one playing, but there wasn't too many people playing as well. You know, you noticed
very poor,
and
even talking to Pat yesterday, he said like when he was starting off, just him and his brother that played a bit, and then there was 1 or 2 more, and you mentioned yourself.
Joe.
But like, there wasn't enough lot of players.
No.
And you're talking late 70s, through the 70s.
Yeah.
Into early 80s. Like when you were in England at that time, the likes of Pat were doing the show band scene. So he's talking around the same time when he left the show band stuff to play traditional music, was in around the early 80s.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, because it started to develop then that John Hoban then had music on a Tuesday night, and I met Seamus Heenahan then, and Seamus had come back from America. I met him in Lewisburg and on the main street, and I was coming in from Clare Island, and brought him in, I invited him in to play the Tuesday night with me in Hoban's, because the Saturday was so successful that she decided we'd go Tuesday night.
Oh, very good.
And then also John McGing up the street, who I knew well, John McGing's pub up there was where John McGing came to me, and he said, "You're the only one that his father would allow to play music in his pub. Do you think we could do it?" Oh, I said I'd be delighted. So John invited me up to play. Packy Quinn, his neighbour up in, an older man used to play the melodeon a bit, like when they'd be, you know, having a sing-song and that, but not really, there wasn't music. So there wasn't music allowed in the pubs. Johnny Garrity's in the Octagon, because Johnny came from Kinnock, the foot of Croagh-Patrick. Johnny would allow music. Believe it or believe it not, that people did not know. It's a bit of an assumption now that I'm saying that people did not know, but who came to support the music? The people who had come in from other countries and tourists. Is there Irish music here tonight? So that in a kind of an Irish way, that you'd know is, oh, well, if they think it's good, well, it must be good. And then it's kind of, if they think it's good, well, then it must be us. I mean, you're authentic, like, you're an authentic musician. I'm an authentic path in music, you know, like it doesn't make sense, like the job seekers, or do you know what I mean, to us, like, it doesn't make sense. But that's, to me, was like that, you know, just playing to just faces of groups of people that came from other places that says, oh, this is it, this is must be what Ireland looks like. And then the Irish are looking at them and saying, well, I suppose we may as well turn as well. And because one of the reasons I do know this, I know very well what it's like to be rejected for your own music. I know it so well, talking about the pain. Like, a lot of what I'm saying is kind of like, I can be very happy, very proud of this, you know, and I sing, and it's all done and dusted with me anyway. There's no bother with me, which is a great way to be. Like, do you know what I mean? In everything. It's not, you know, I have to struggle as well, you know, get through. But like, when I'm saying all this area of music, all this thing, whatever, is that all that I knew was that as long as I'm real, I can't really do anything else about anything else. You know, what people think, how they go down. And I did not ever associate good music with a good crowd. As Patrick Kavanagh said. Paddy Kavanagh said, I didn't associate it with how it went down, or there was a small crowd in tonight, or you do it for a bit less, or you know, the till is locked. You know, I didn't ever associate, but more than that, I associated with, and this is something you asked earlier, and it's something that I knew in my heart and soul, that what I was singing or playing, like I can be saying, well, you know, I'm not like a genius, I'm not like a brilliant, but I sure as hell know what I'm doing is from the heart. Here come a few French, they're not great at the talk, more from Clare Island, I know by their walk. You surely heard Billy, he's tops on the box. Have you seen Connie singing The Little Red Fox? 11:05, I'm homeless once more. I've broken the curfew, the bolts on the door. You're always welcome, says Barbara, and Dan Sticks Garrity's house is a far better plan.